I'm an experienced marketer turned fractional CMO and entrepreneur, helping businesses remove friction from the buyer's journey. Would that fit?
Welcome, Eric, to Jagged with Jasravee, Conversations at the Edge with thought leaders from the marketing, branding, and the business world. It is great to have you here.
Jasravee, thank you very much for having me on the show. I'm excited to be here.
We wanted you to share some of your learnings in doing effective B2B marketing and, how you sort of worked with, Siebel Systems, something that I have also used as part of ICICI Bank. It was being used by ICICI Bank before they migrated to something done by Infosys. So how do you, let's start with Siebel first, that how did you position it as a, leading software for CRM in the financial services domain? And can you just take us, through that journey?
Yeah, my time at Siebel Systems was actually a real high point in my career. The company was sort of on a rocket ship of growth. There were so many smart people that were working there, and they were truly passionate about the product. And, Siebel Systems was really the grandfather of CRM products. Now you've got a lot of people that have moved on to Salesforce.com and HubSpot and other places like that. But back in those days, it was really Siebel. And I think the whole concept of a customer relationship management platform where all your data and interaction history about a customer was in one place was really exciting to people. And, my job there was to take that to the financial services world, was to share that message with banks and credit unions and brokerage firms and insurance companies, people in the financial services space that were looking at their huge portfolio of customers and saying, hey, if I could have all that information interconnected and be visible in one place, just think of how that could change my world. And so in many ways, it was a product that was easy to sell. The harder part was getting all the technology to work as advertised. It's a pretty complex thing to do, but it was fun to take that out to the marketplace.
Right. And, the banks are, usually very conservative, initially, and, when they take a long time to get used to any new software, but at the same time there's a lot of opportunity within the customer set that they have. They can cross sell and upsell a host variety of both asset and liability products. So any specific case study or anything that comes to your mind in terms of how your clients leveraged it to sort of either increase their sales or improve their customer satisfaction?
Well, there is an important learning, I think, that came out of that whole period. And one of the challenges that I think a lot of banks especially faced is they all kind of have this attitude that somehow they are very unique, that what they're offering to the marketplace is significantly different than what their competitors are offering. And I would argue that's simply not true. There's a lot of commonality, especially in regulated financial services products. And so what happened during that period is that a lot of financial service organizations would buy software like a CRM and then heavily customize it. They would make up specific rules for their business that they thought were different than sort of what the core platform offered. And what happened over time is that created a lot of unnecessary complexity. And as they went to upgrade their software to future versions, they found it increasingly difficult and expensive because they had put so many customizations in place. And so I think the real learning from that period came in that what you really want to do when you're buying a piece of packaged software is try to leverage as much out-of-the-box functionality as possible, because then you're leveraging the tools and the product that somebody else has built and is going to support on your behalf, rather than a bunch of customizations that your team is going to have to support. So that was a real challenge. And I think as we looked at it from a marketing perspective, that was a real push in later years to say, let's focus on selling out-of-the-box functionality more so than the customizations.
Right. No, that's great. That's great. And then you sort of, Siebel Systems, I think, merged or got acquired by Oracle, right? And, you were sort of in the leadership role for marketing strategy there, right? So at that point of time, when you got integrated with Oracle, etc. So how did that integration happen, and was it a seamless process? And then what was your role in Oracle after it acquired Siebel Systems?
Oracle has such a great brand, such a big brand reputation that things like awareness, you don't really have to focus too much on brand awareness because it's a known commodity. People understand what Oracle is. The challenge then becomes is they have so many different products and services that they offer that getting the spotlight to shine on the products and services that you support is a challenge because there are a lot of rules, there are a lot of restrictions on what you can't do. The company has objectives that they want to push out into the marketplace at any given time. And so the energy and the spotlight is going to be there. So it was more making the customer base, the prospect base, aware of the specific solutions underneath that big global brand, rather than at Siebel, it was a combination of just making people aware of the brand as well as the product.
Right. That's great. And coming to your, experience at Oracle, right? Since you were in the marketing, leadership side, at Siebel, probably because the organization is smaller, more agile, it may be possible to sort of interface very well with the sales team and all that. But in large organizations which have their own structure and hierarchies and silos, how did you work with the marketing team in terms of either nurturing programs for leads or or getting executive level interest in your product? So how did you sort of do that bit, and what were your learnings from there?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think when you're talking about enterprise level software, you're talking about software that often is millions of dollars in contract value. These aren't the kind of products that somebody's going to go to your website and push a buy now button and purchase, right? These are things that take months and months, 16, 18 month sales cycles for a lot of these products. And that really becomes about education and then relationship building. So the first thing that you're trying to do from a marketing perspective is build the awareness in the marketplace that you offer specific services. In my case, it was in the financial services sector that Oracle had products that supported banks' needs in that sector. So it was building that awareness. And then it was really an education effort to say, here's what these products can do. Here's how they can integrate into your existing technology stack. And here's the advantages, that will bring. And then from there, it's all about supporting the sales teams in relationship building. It's, what do we have to do to foster relationships, or do things like executive level events where they can have some quality time with an executive from one of these organizations, to build that trust and then to help move that sales cycle along. There was just so much involved in sort of relationship building and working with the sales teams to make sure that they had access to the people that they needed to, because typically it's not one decision maker, it's a whole tree of decision makers that you have to work on over time.
Right, that's great. And then you moved on to Sunview Software, right? And you worked on a digital transformation program for them. And I read through your LinkedIn profile, and you repositioned Sunview Software. So that seemed interesting to me. And how did you reposition Sunview Software? And how did you achieve, and you also mentioned that you achieved significant decrease in lead acquisition spends, and also in wide increase in the organic web traffic that you use. So what was your experience there, and how was it different working for a medium-sized enterprise versus a large one? And how could you sort of, work on your repositioning and other marketing initiatives?
Well, the fun thing about going to a smaller company, and this was a company of under 100 people, is that you really kind of control the show, right? You make all the decisions regarding marketing and can very easily see the results of those decisions. And you compare that to a larger company like an Oracle, where it's so matrixed and there are so many other things going on, it's much harder to have that same level of control. And so when I got to that company, the first thing that I noticed is that marketing and sales were very separate functions. Marketing was a numbers game. It was all about pushing leads over to sales. Sales was all about cherry picking, finding the leads that they thought were the best, working on those leads, and then discarding the rest. And so it was an incredibly inefficient process because a lot of leads were being generated, but because of the cherry picking that was going on the sales side, a lot of leads just never went anywhere. And I think one of the things that I really focused on when I got there was, first of all, we implemented HubSpot there. We had Salesforce and we had Pardot as our marketing automation system. But at that time, Pardot just didn't have great analytical capabilities. So there was information going in, but we weren't really getting any information out that was saying what was working and what wasn't. So we switched and we kept Salesforce for the sales team, but we implemented HubSpot on the marketing side. And we cleaned out a ton of data because there's a real temptation for marketing teams is not to throw any names away. But the problem is that over time, it just became hundreds of thousands of names that really had nothing to do with interest in our products or services, but were sort of clogging up the system and messing up the metrics. And so it was really a process of saying, let's downsize the data. Let's focus on getting good quality data in here. Let's start to put some metrics in here that we can measure and monitor. And then let's really understand the buyer's journey and how we need to nurture those early stage leads to become the kind of leads that the sales team ultimately wants to be working on, those buyer ready leads. It's very hard to deliver to a sales team a buyer ready lead, right? That takes a lot of work. But I think from their perspective, that's all they wanted to talk about. And so there was a lot of education in the process.
Right. So that's great. And the part about, the organic web traffic and all that. So you say, how did you sort of, did you have a content marketing program and how did you sort of drive a lot of relevant traffic? I mean, it's easy to drive any type of traffic, but relevant traffic, which is, which could possibly be interested in your product. So how did you do that?
Well, there were a couple things. First of all, when I got there, they were originally hosting their website on a proprietary platform that an agency had developed for them. It was not really SEO optimized, and so they were not really getting the benefits of the content that they were putting out in a blog. So moving to the HubSpot platform, we spent a lot of time on SEO optimization to make sure that that content could be discovered. The other thing is that they had engaged with an SEO agency. And one of the real challenges that I see with a lot of SEO agencies out there is they come in and they say, hey, we're going to help you rank. And after the end of 3 months, 6 months, whatever, they say, well, we helped you rank for, 500 keywords.
Right.
Well, yeah, that's great. But are the keywords that matter? Are the keywords that anybody is searching on?
Right.
And it's a real scam in some ways that a lot of these vendors out there are pushing a strategy that, of course, is going to get something to rank, but it's an irrelevant ranking. And so there were a lot of things that were ranking that just were doing us no good, and a lot of money that was being spent on PPC that really wasn't generating results either. So we focused on organic, we focused on inbound marketing and creating great content, and we saw the results of that for sure.
That's a very good answer. So I think we can move to your key, area of, expertise or about friction in the buyer's journey. So, yeah.
Yeah. So in the coming times, in modern retail, giving a frictionless consumer experience is becoming more and more important. Yes. What are the sources of this friction in the entire journey, and how should one organization go about reducing it?
There are so many potential areas of friction, and it's not just sort of on the buying journey, but it's all the way through, the sales and the servicing process. But if I just give you a simple example, yesterday I was buying some clothes online, and you go to some websites, and some websites will even have it that they want you to create an account before you can even get into the website. They want you to sign up for something. Yeah. So right there, that's a point of friction, right? Mm-hmm. And then you sort of get past that and you've selected a few things, you're in your shopping cart, and now you go to checkout. And again, many websites will say, okay, first you need to create a user ID and a password, then please enter all your billing and shipping information and your credit card. And oh, by the way, we need that little 3 or 4 digit code on the front or back of your credit card, which you don't remember. So you've got to go search for it in your wallet someplace. All of that is friction. All of that is little points of friction. And then I compare that to some of the experiences that exist today with tools like an Apple Pay or a PayPal checkout, where you simply load up your shopping cart and then they say, well, do you want to check out with PayPal or do you want to check out with Apple Pay? And you simply push the button. It pre-fills all your shipping address and credit card information. You don't have to enter that crazy CVC code and you're done. It's literally one push and you're out the door. And that's just a simple example of friction, because anytime you're creating some friction, you're giving the customer an opportunity to bail out. What if they didn't have that credit card handy, so they couldn't put in that 3 or 4 digit code? They might just bail out of the shopping cart altogether and say, well, I'll do this another time, if they actually do. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to make that experience as smooth and as frictionless as possible. And oftentimes what happens in businesses is the friction is created because the company wants something that they value more than the customer is getting something of value. So why does the company want you to put in an account or an email address before you get to the website? It's because they want your email address, right? They want to market to you. They want to sell. That's a value to them. But for many customers, it's not a value to give out that email address just to gain entry into a site where you're going to make a purchase.
Right.
So you have to think, what's the exchange of value, and is that good for both parties?
Yeah, that's the fundamental. Great. Eric, how has Amazon gone about it? Because, I mean, they seem to be proactively thinking and coming up with solutions, and they are creating expectations or, changing benchmarks. But how do they create this kind of an ecosystem where, friction is just absent?
Yeah, they've got some really smart people to start with, but they're obsessed with it. They're obsessed with efficiency. They're obsessed with making things easier and better. They're the ones that came up with, buy now with one click. And, you're right. They've set the bar high. And even if you're not in a retail business, people are starting to expect that same level of service no matter what kind of business that you're in. They're having a dramatic effect across multiple industries because they're just getting so good at what they do. And, as a consumer, it's great, right? Because we can see other companies copying them and working really hard to match their level of efficiency and the lack of friction that Amazon has. But it's not easy. And I think that's where companies really run into problems, because that really takes a lot of investment. It really takes a lot of thought to figure out what are those areas of friction and how can you make even small changes that make things easier for your end customer.
Right. So, Eric, you talked about that it's not just the buyer's journey, which can be a source of friction. Now, two things are coming to my mind. One is friction on the website. What could be a source of that, and how can that be diminished? And also, what about brands? Do you think in this whole desired experience that a company wants to give to a consumer, a brand can also be a source of friction?
So the website example is a good one. I like to use that one a lot. So I'm a Mac user. A lot of people out there are Mac users or PC users. They're two basic operating systems that most people are using, and they're most likely using Safari or Chrome or, probably one of those two browsers, most likely.
Right.
And if you think about what companies like Apple and Google have done with their browser technology, is they've tried to make them very powerful and easy to use. So if you go to a website and you have to sign in, put your password or your user ID and password in, these browsers have developed technology to save that securely so it can pre-fill when you get there, because obviously everybody wants you to use secure passwords, right? And if these crazy passwords that are just jumbles of letters and numbers, you're not going to remember them. So you need something to save them for you. But think about how many websites you go to that the sign-in form doesn't recognize that browser technology to pre-fill that password. And so then you've got to dig into the bowels of your browser to find out where that got saved and then copy and paste it and put it in. That's a huge source of friction. And it's an incredibly simple one for companies to deal with, because all they need to do is test their website, their software against, the three major browsers that are in use. And they could very clearly see if it works or if it doesn't work. Same thing with, applications on your phone. How many of them work correctly with those authentication tools? How many don't? That's just one example, but it's a source of friction for me every single week with some company that they just don't test their software. And I think that can be, something that's so easily solved if they put their efforts towards reducing friction. And you talked about brands and what brands are doing. I think sometimes the friction that brands create is they rest on their laurels too much. They view it as a privilege to do business with them, and so therefore they put the onus on you rather than taking the onus on themselves. Let me just give you a quick example there. I recently went to a doctor's visit at a big healthcare provider here in town. And, I had to call up the doctor's office to make the appointment. And I had to listen to the menu of, and the menu was, well, if you're a doctor, press 1. If you're a pharmacist, press 2. If you're a lab technician, press 3. Going through all the numbers, I think I got to number 8 or 9. If you're a customer, press 9.
Right.
Don't you think it should be, if you're a customer, press 1?
Right.
Well, you don't have to listen to the rest of this. You're who we're servicing. But
Right.
no, the customer was the last choice, not the first choice. That tells you everything that you need to know.
Right. And coming to this B2B process and the sales friction on account of that, I mean, very often when you are like researching a software, researching a company, you don't have sufficient content, you don't have sufficient testimonials, you don't have case studies which you can refer. So when you are sort of, when you want to, select a software or a service that company is providing, the absence of any information or testimonials, etc., also cause a lot of friction in the buyer's mind. So how do you look at friction in this B2B scenario and B2B sales process?
Yeah, I think that's really an interesting point, because especially I think with younger companies or software companies, there's this tendency to talk about what a product does. So you talk about features, right? You talk about cool things that you've developed.
Right.
But you don't really put yourself in the mind of a buyer. Why are they buying this? Why are they coming to your website? What problems do they have? What problem are they attempting to solve with their product or service? And it's amazing how many sites you go to that really don't talk about what some of the underlying issues are that people have that their product is ultimately trying to solve. It's all about cool little features. I always laugh. You see, an advertisement on TV, for some new product now with more vitamin W.
Right.
But they never say what vitamin W is supposed to do.
Right.
They just say it has more of it now.
Right.
And I think there are a lot of companies that do things like that. They amp up features, they amp up capabilities without ever really saying, why does that matter?
And coming to the, again to the B2B side, we find that the companies, may, as you said, put out all the features and stuff like that. But there are different types of buyers which approach a company. Somebody might be very skilled and be quite aware and technically very sound. But a lot of time now, because a lot of technologies are bought by non-IT guys, like a lot of CMOs or CSOs are spending money on IT, and they don't have as much information about technology and stuff like that. And the companies have information which a CTO can possibly process. So how do you react to a changing environment where a lot of budgets for IT and software is being spent by CMOs, but the language, the communication, or the expectation is that you have to be a very technically sound person to be able to understand what the company is offering?
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure, because there are so many tools out there that it's very easy to get tool overload. And especially with SaaS models and everything being a subscription, you can look at the end of the year and see all these tools that you're paying for, and it really adds up. So you've got to understand how these tools are going to fit into your workflow, not how to build a workflow around these tools, because that can be fraught with problems. I think the other thing that's really important, and why CMOs need to work with people on the technology side as well, is that integration is so important. You don't want a lot of silos of data being collected different places that's not combined together, because you want to be able to look at metrics. You want to be able to see what's working and what's not. And so the more that the tool set that you have is interconnected and sharing data, so you have maybe a single source of truth for all your customer data, and then you branch off with other tools that do specific tasks, that's really important, because then you can measure and monitor. So I think when organizations are looking at adding tools to their suite to help out, that is the primary thing that I advise is how is this going to fit in with your existing infrastructure? Is it going to be connected or is it going to be standalone?
And there's a lot of talk, and a lot of companies are using predictive AI and chatbots and all that. So what is the role that you foresee for these kind of technologies? And also if for certain sectors like industries or industrial sectors where there's a large catalog and a lot of products, these things might be, they might be necessary, it may not be optional. So how do you look at the evolution of these technologies and the role that they would play in marketing and also in the customer buying process?
Well, AI is just getting more and more sophisticated. And, a lot of times I look at it and say, analytics is sort of the rear view mirror. You're looking behind you, you're evaluating things that have happened where AI and some of this predictive modeling is designed to really predict where things might happen. And so both of them need to be used in combination. And I think the tools and capabilities are going to get more robust. That said, AI works best with a really good data set, right? And it's very hard to keep data clean, especially as you get to be a larger and larger company. Things change over time. You integrate new tools, you add different pieces of data, the definitions of things change, and all of that can be problematic for any tools like this because they're looking at a constant set of data to produce consistent results, right? So as things change, that makes it more difficult. Right. So I don't know. I see a great future in what these tools are with things like chatbots. I think it really depends on the kind of business that you're in. I think, for myself, I don't want to call into a call center. I dread it, And so if they've got a chatbot functionality, I'll typically give that a try to see if it works, but it loses all credibility if you can tell that it's a machine that's there, it's asking you dumb questions, and you can tell that really what they're trying to do is get you not to talk to a human, but that this tool really is not going to provide you with the answers that you need. And I think it just depends on the kind of business and the types of questions that you normally receive. Is the technology robust enough to be able to handle that in an efficient way, or is it just going to annoy people and actually create additional friction? If there are times when you need to talk to a real live person, and if these tools are just roadblocks to keep you from doing that, that only makes things worse.
Don't tell us we didn't warn you.
Where is that space age weapon that you've got there?
Your favorite holiday destination?
Oh, I love to go to Park City, Utah and ski.
Okay.
Your favorite cuisine, food cuisine?
Oh, I'm a sucker for a good pizza. I love Italian food.
One thing no one knows about you?
Oh, that's really a good question. What doesn't somebody know about me? I was voted most likely to succeed in high school. How's that?
Okay. Your pet peeve?
Friction in the buying cycle.
Your favorite Avenger/superhero?
Oh, I'm a traditionalist. I still like Batman.
Right. If you had to say something to your 18-year-old self?
Build a strong network immediately.
Okay.
Focus on your network.
What's next?
Well, COVID is rapidly ending here in the States, so some summer vacation.
So, Eric, where can our audiences find you online? Would you like your website and your podcast?
Yeah, the Virtual CMO podcast.
Yeah, so thank you for that. So the Virtual CMO podcast is on all the major podcast platforms. My company website is the 5 Echelon Group, and it's 5echelon.com.
Yeah, so we'll put all these links on our description page also on our so that people can easily, without much friction, find you.
Oh, there you go. I like it. Yeah, well, I love the interview format that you have here. I hope that people do like and subscribe, and follow is the new word, right? It's no longer subscribe, it's follow.
Okay, thank you.
So yes, I hope they'll follow the podcast and catch more of these exciting interviews.